Interesting. I see that YouTube just loaded. Okay, good. So YouTube is now live as well, and we are on Facebook as well. We're going straight into it. Good morning to our live studio audience and to those that are with us online. Winston and Marty, I see, are with us online. YouTube is hiding the chat today. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Every day it changes this, how they run it. What is it? Somebody back in YouTube headquarters that decides, okay, today we're going to do it like this. Today we're going to do that. How does this even work? I don't understand how they decide when to post and when not to post, and how to make the rules. Anyways, good morning, Terry as well. Okay.
That's the problem. There's no rules.
Exactly. You need to have rules.
And Rabbi, if you knew how it worked, you'd be a billionaire.
Yeah. I guess so. Ed, good morning. We missed you this morning in Shul. Hope all is well. Let's go straight to it. The prohibition of Torah. If you thought laws of kosher were all about meat and milk, you're right, but there's a lot more where that came from. It's much more about meat and milk. It's much more about bacon and shellfish. There's a whole area of kosher law, which we're about to uncover, and it's not pretty. It says like this. It says in the Torah, in Leviticus chapter 11, verses 41 through 44, it says like this: you shall not abominate your souls with every creepy, crawly thing, and you shall not make yourselves impure, and you shall be holy. You shall sanctify yourselves, and you shall be holy, because I am holy, and you shall not make yourselves impure. So the Torah is very, very specific about not making ourselves impure with anything which creeps or crawls, right? We just read about it in the Torah a few weeks ago. Was it last week? The laws of insects. And there are 3 different kind of creepy crawlies, which the oral law explains to us what they are. Now, it's very interesting. I was dealing with somebody with a written agreement with somebody in the past few days and weeks. And I realized how impossible it was to understand the written agreement without any conversations. You couldn't possibly understand what was being written unless we had the verbal conversations. Okay, the context. You need the context. I've said this before, but I saw it myself in recent negotiations as I realized for the thought that you can have a written Torah without an accompaniment of an oral Torah, it just defies logic. It doesn't make any sense that God would give us a written document without any context and say, here, work it out yourself, knock yourselves out and figure it out. It's got to have the oral context, which is the reason why we have the oral Torah as well. And the oral Torah in Tractate Makos 16, folio 16b, is what goes into the details of discussing what are these creepy, crawly insects. Otherwise, here you go. You got the written Torah. Don't abominate yourself with anything that creeps and crawls. What is that? What is that? Is that scorpions? Is that what is that? It crawls, right? It creeps, crawls. Maybe it crawls and doesn't creep. Is it okay? You know what I mean? So here comes the Talmud and tells us as follows: there are 3, and again, this is the tradition from Moses, who received it on Mount Sinai from God, together with the Torah that was orally transmitted generation through generation. And there the Talmud tells us that there's 3 different kinds of insects, and they are the creepy crawly that flies, the creepy crawly that crawls on the earth, and the creepy crawly of the water. So of the air, earth, and water. The difference between them is how many biblical prohibitions you violate when you eat them. So when someone eats an insect that flies, he is violating no less than 6 biblical commandments. Out of 613 commandments, 6 of them pertain to flying insects. One who eats a insect of the earth is violating only 5 biblical prohibitions, and one who eats an insect of the water is only violating 4 biblical prohibitions. Now, bacon is just one, right? Bacon is just one, which is really interesting to realize that the pig is, look, they're all treif, you know what I mean? They're all a deep insult to God Almighty. And when we study Hasidus, we realize that beyond being an insult to God, it is something which literally cuts off your air supply to your soul. Torah and mitzvahs is not just to boost God's broken self-esteem, right? Torah and mitzvahs we do in order to keep us connected to the tree of life. And when you, to violate, to do a sin, would be a kid sitting on a branch, and that cartoon, when you see the guy, sawing off a branch, he's like, oh, I could do this myself, I got this, right? He up 40 feet in the sky, and you're sawing, if you do one prohibition, it's like cutting 1 inch through the branch. 5 prohibitions being 5 inches through the branch. I'm not sure how much further you can go before it all cracks, and you just find yourself crashing headfirst onto the ground. It's not that it's not good for God, it's not good for you to do the biblical prohibitions, which is why it matters how many biblical prohibitions you're talking about, right? Now, let's go into some more detail of what kind of insects we're talking about. You're not allowed to eat an insect of any size, as long as it's visible to the human eye through normal visual human beings. So you're not talking about somebody that walks around with 4-inch glasses. What do you say? With magnifying glasses, exactly. Not a person that has magnifying glasses because they're what do they call it? Clinically blind, or they're legally blind. We're not talking about somebody who's legally blind. We're talking about a person with normal vision, right? And it makes no difference the color of the insect. Makes no difference if it's the same color as the fruit or vegetable it's in, or if it has a different color to the fruit or vegetable which it's in. Sometimes you'll open up a strawberry, and the strawberry's got those little white dots in it, little white things amidst the red. So the insects in a strawberry, they're white. So you say, well, it looks the same. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. And in lettuce, sometimes you have the green little insects. Just because it's camouflage, it doesn't mean it's not there, right?
Sounds like chametz.
It's worse than chametz. You'll see in a moment. Well, maybe it's the same. You'll see in a moment. However, a very, very small insect, which is so small that it cannot be seen by the naked human eye, and it can only be seen by a microscope or a magnifying glass, that would not be included in the prohibition. So in other words, you don't have to go around and take samples of the air where you're breathing. You walk into a room and you have like a little laboratory with you, and take an air sample and say, oh, come with the oxygen mask. I'm sorry, I'm not breathing in this room yet. You do a little air sample and you figure if there's any bacteria, amoeba, I don't know what might be flying in the air. And they say, okay, this room is not certified kosher to breathe in. We don't do that, because if it's not visual, right, then you don't have a problem. It's not a prohibition to, it would not be a prohibition to breathe it in. What about the eggs of an insect? So these are absolutely prohibited in being eaten, just like the insects themselves. And therefore, it's very important to check and to sift the foods and the drinks which have a suspicion that they might have an infestation either of eggs or of insects, right? You know what's worse than finding a worm in your apple? The only thing that's worse than finding a worm in your apple is finding half a worm in your apple. So if there's reason to suspect that there's an insect in this kind of food, then you should check it, right? You have to check it.
Well, one of the worst things is when you want to have a date, and you got to sit there and look at it, and you find one, and you lose all appetite afterwards.
A date?
A date.
You mean a date like a date from a tree, or a date from? Oh, I'm sure if you're having a date like you're getting married. Not that kind of a date. Right. Dates, dates could be a problem. Yeah, when you open them up. And dates is only one of many kinds of fruits and vegetables. That when you open up a date, you can't just eat a date whole. If you open it up and you look and you take out the pit and you see all the creepy crawlies in there, it is absolutely gross.
Yes.
I mean, it could be, not always.
So what do they do at kosher camps, children's camps? When my kids went to camp, you know what they called the drink? They called it bug juice. Bug juice. Right?
Bug juice.
Because you couldn't keep the bugs out of, even when you had whatever the bugs got in. So how did they make sure that there's no insects in the liquids at kosher camps?
Well, I think you would look into your cup first. You're supposed to look into your cup to make sure that there's nothing inside of there which doesn't belong there.
They called it bug juice? Oh, yeah. I have no idea. Oh, yeah.
It kind of makes sense that would be the reason for the name, because because here in Florida, I don't know about anywhere else, but here in Florida, there's something called a mayfly.
Mayfly?
A mayfly. You know what that is, a mayfly? It's a fly that I met this morning. I realized, it must be almost May. I was trying to dive in. I don't know if you noticed. I was trying to dive and lead the service.
Oh, yeah, you moved.
I moved. There was this guy. He was like, just kept on coming back to my face. It's like this tiny, annoying fly. It's like a gnat, just big enough to be visible and to like annoy you. It's not nowhere near a mosquito size. It's like tiny size, but you can see it, and they're so annoying. Normally they come in droves of like 1 million at a time, and they'll live like in a little cloud, and they just like a swarm of them. They'll come at you only in May. It's like May, June kind of Florida thing.
Somebody you knew reincarnated.
I don't know, man. So I was thinking to myself, goodness gracious, I'm trying to dive in. This is like so weird. I'm trying to dive in, and I remember, in Australia they have that weird hat that they wear, this like round hat, the people down in Australia, and they have these little strings with little bullies in the bottom of them. You know what I'm talking about? That what do they call it? Dundee, Crocodile Dundee or something. They wear these hats and they have these like little strings with a little ball around, so it's all around the hat. So whenever they move, they're basically shooing away the flies instead of having to go like this. I was trying to dive in like this, and the whole time I was like smashing myself, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't concentrate anymore. It's actually moved because they're very territorial, these little mayflies. They stay where they are. I was like, you know what? I'll move over, a foot, which for him is like a universe, and I'm good. I think I was okay there. And I was thinking to myself, why did this fly have to come to me today? And I realized, I'm teaching about insects today, and we're about to get into insect biology and insect reproductive wonders. And there are some insects that they just come out of nowhere, like literally nowhere. The Talmud says that there are insects that are born out of the rain. I think snails. The Talmud says that snails, certain kinds of snails.
Come out of the ground.
I don't know what's going. The Talmud, they come out of the ground, but are they? They're not sexually reproduced.
The worms also.
The worms, but they're not sexually reproduced. They come out of some other form of matter. And the Talmud talks about like after a rain, there's certain kinds of insects that come but it's not like a mom and dad situation, So I was thinking to myself, maybe this is why this fly had to come, because it's May. I don't know if these guys have a calendar or something. They're hibernating 11 months a year or something, or they're just like, a certain kind of energy, and then they come out of nowhere, right? It's just interesting that's how they happen. I wonder if anybody here could Google for us the mayfly and about how these insects reproduce, the various kinds of reproductive techniques of insects. Okay, so Terry says, I think newts come out of the ground. I don't know what a newt is, Terry. Maybe you could be a little more specific. Is it like a snail, or is it like a worm, or what exactly is it? Marty, that's why water is kosher, since it has microscopic organisms. Now, Marty, there was a somewhat crazy movement a while ago that tried to say that water needs to be checked for kosher, because these guys believed in microscopic insects, but obviously not everybody was able to accept that kind of stringency. But you'll still see there are some people that will say, our water is filtered like 14 times to make sure that it's kosher. It all depends on how strict you want to be with yourself, right?
It's a salamander.
It's a salamander. Fascinating. Wow. So a newt is a salamander that comes out of the ground. It comes out of the ground, and it's not sexually reproduced. It's like a whole little creature. It's like a few inches long.
You want to know about the mayfly?
Tell us about the mayfly. Yeah, see.
Mayflies are aquatic insects belonging to the order of Ephemerophera. The order is part of an ancient group of insects, which also contains dragonflies and damselflies.
Well, these mayflies, where do they come from, and why do they only come in May?
There's over 3,000 species of mayfly are known worldwide. Mayflies have 4 stages in their life cycle: abunymph, sub, imago, and imago. Male mayflies form a swarm just above the water. Females fly into the swarm to mate. After mating in flight, the female falls onto the surface of the water and lays her eggs.
All right, so it does look like some sort of a sexual reproduction going on over there in the mayflies family. It seems like one female flies into a swarm of 1 million males. That sounds like quite a complicated situation.
It starts in May and continues to do so throughout spring and summer.
Just one second, Rob, one second. Can the people on Facebook hear what Rob is reading? I just want to make sure that it's not like dead time for you. Can you hear? Just give me an indication if you can hear what Rob is saying. Anything else, Rob?
No.
All right, good. So thank you for sharing that. We'll get to that, to the reproductive techniques in just a moment. What about viruses? Are you allowed to eat viruses or ingest like a coronavirus? We were, okay, Dean cannot hear you, Rob, and Winston hears 90%. Okay, Dean, you might not be hearing him because he's not talking right now for the past minute or so. So whatever, we're going to get the better of this. So it looks like certain people were able to hear when he was reading, but now he's not reading. Okay, so viruses, we were all scared into the realization of these huge balls with these little trumpets sticking out of them, and that was the virus, the coronavirus, right? So are you allowed to eat a virus? The answer, in terms of kosher, obviously in terms of health, you don't want to eat a virus ever. But viruses are, and by the way, I think that realistically speaking, there's viruses everywhere all the time. There's like millions and millions and millions of viruses all the time everywhere. So it's not like it's easy to actually avoid them. It's actually probably impossible.
Not eat them is if you stop breathing.
Yeah, but if you're dead, you could probably not eat them. But yeah, so viruses are only if they're visual. If you actually are able to identify them. I'm sorry, even if you are able to identify them, there's no prohibition in ingesting them from a kosher perspective. Okay, so let's talk about this. What happens with an insect which got mixed up in a food? So we know, generally speaking, that you're not allowed to eat insects. And the laws of insects are very interesting. The laws of checking vegetables and fruits. How to go through the processes of rinsing and washing and salt water and another rinsing and different processes of things that you have to do in order to make sure. Right. So right. So for example, like let me see here a second. There's like a whole list I have over here. Like for example, avocado. Right. Let's talk about avocado for just a moment. Avocado has a chazaka, which means it's like established to be generally clean, right? How would you what would give an indication that it might be a problem is if it has black spots. Sorry, black spots are not problematic. It's not a sign of infestation. Sometimes, very infrequently, they do have some sort of insects in the peel. Therefore, you do not need to check an avocado. The only thing is, you should try to be mindful that there should be nothing. When you take off the peel of the avocado, there shouldn't be. If you just try to look at it and see if there's any insects that might be attached to the inside of the, to the inside of the peel. Right now, there's a very long list of all of the various kinds of. Of all the various kinds of fruits and vegetables, right? So, I think I'm going to say this for a later class, but let's just go a little bit further into the understanding of the general rule of the insect. So, what happens with an insect that got mixed up into a food? So, a worm or some sort of a juk. How do you say juk in English? A juk is like some sort of bug. It's like a bug, right? Or an ant or something like that got mixed up into a food. So you realize that eating an ant is more treif than a pig. You realize that, right? An ant is a creepy, crawly insect of the earth. It's 5 biblical prohibitions to eat an ant. To eat bacon, right, is
one, you say.
one ant. One ant, right?
No, but you said when you eat bacon, it's only one love.
Yeah, one love, exactly. One prohibition, yeah. Imagine somebody eats an ant salad. Can you imagine eating an ant salad?
Go to China.
In China, I'm sure they eat all this kind of nonsense, right? You have like 1,000 ants. I mean, that's so many prohibitions. It's just like unthinkable. So what happens if an insect got mixed up into a food? If they got mixed up when they were whole, like a whole ant or a whole mosquito, a whole little gnat, like a mayfly gets stuck into your dough and you're like, big deal. You're doing the dough and it gets stuck in the dough and you're like, I'm not going to worry about it, right? Then you're not allowed to eat the entire food until you will find the insect or the bug and take it out of the food. It makes no difference the size of the food. Doesn't matter if you're cooking for 1,000 or 10,000 people. You know the rule of being nullified 1 to 60. There's no batal b'shishim. There's no nullification in 1 to 60 because there's a rule that an entire organism can never ever be nullified. So if it's a whole ant or a whole gnat, even if it's tiny, 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 if it's a whole little gnat, but it's a whole gnat, or whole insect, then it can never ever be nullified, just like chametz on Pesach, which we said is never ever nullified, not even 1 to 1,000,000, right? Regular treif is canceled out 1 in 60. But when it comes to an insect or chametz, if it's a full insect, it is never ever nullified, not even 1 to 1,000,000, right? And you have to take it out. What?
If you remove it?
Oh, if you remove it, it's fine. Yeah. You got it. If you remove it, it's fine. But if you are able to remove some soup, let's say you take out some soup, and in this bowl of soup, you can't find the net, but these bowls of soup we know for sure are clean, right? If you take out this vegetable or this soup, and you know that here there's no insects not here, then you're good, right? So you know that you could do it one at a time until you realize that it must be in the leftovers, right? Now, that's if you're talking about a whole insect. But if you're talking about an insect which got mushed, right? It got like it got mixed up, but it got completely what's the word, like not killed. If it's killed, but it's whole, then it's a problem. No, if it got like when you like what do you do to vegetables? You
Chop them?
chopped, yeah, but whatever. But like what's the word? Pulverized. If it got pulverized, right, there you go. So if it got pulverized into the fruit and they're no longer complete, and now they got mixed up into the food and they're lost to the point that you can't find them anymore, then you are allowed to eat the whole fruit. You are allowed to eat the whole food, even if it's not canceled 1 to 60, because the presence of the insect doesn't add any flavor to the food. On the contrary, it ruins the flavor of the food. And it's pretty gross, right? So since it works negatively towards the food, therefore, it doesn't, it hurts macerated is what Marty says. It says macerated. So if the insect is negatively impacting the taste of the food, then it's not a problem, right? It's interesting. The Talmud gets at the whole discussion about a mouse that falls into beer. From what I've read, I've heard that they've actually found mice, in beer factories. God forbid, it sounds awful, just disgusting. But if a mouse falls into beer, then a mouse actually improves the flavor of the beer. So it's not a good thing for beer, right? But that would be a different problem. But when generally speaking, insect, since it ruins the flavor, therefore it would be okay to eat it as long as it's macerated.
Then you can just use it as shampoo if you want.
Yeah, you use it as shampoo. Now take a look. So take a look. So David Rosen here. David Rosen, fascinating. He runs 4 bakeries in Lakewood, New Jersey. I think they're called Foursquare, if I remember correctly. David, what are your places called? And there's actually a member of our show that knows you, David, by the way. Anyways, so David is saying that it's hard work. He buys pre-checked lettuce, which is a premium. You pay a premium to buy lettuce, which is already pre-checked. Bodek, which means checked. It's the name of a company, Bodek. Or Positive is another company. And he buys 300-500 pounds a week of these vegetables. He buys them pre-checked because he can't afford the time or the expense, I'm sure, of going through those lettuce to check them. So he buys them pre-checked. And in Israel, they do something called hydroponics, where they grow them not in the earth, but they actually grow them in water, hanging, right? Like you see if you go to Epcot Center in Orlando here, you'll see how they grow stuff like in the air. And what happens is...
It is specified in Epcot that it was...
Israeli technology. Interesting. I didn't see that. 4 Corners, it's called. Thank you, David. But what happens is that when you buy when you grow it under these conditions in very specific greenhouses where there is no possibility for any of these insects to come, in such a case, you growing it in a situation where there is no infestation to start off with, and those you'd want to pay a premium for that kind of fruits and vegetables because you know that you don't have to go through the hassle of checking. I'm sure you remember your grandmother checking the rice.
Oh, yeah.
Sifting the rice. Do you remember this, Rob? Does anybody here remember your grandmother maybe checking the rice? I mean, you're supposed to check your rice. What are you checking your rice for? Infestation, right?
Very, very much big about that, by the way.
Of course, it's very important.
Very much.
It's very important to check your rice. Take a look.
In the olden days of Gush Katif, they were the famous...
In Gush Katif, in the Gaza Strip, right?
They were the famous suppliers of all of the lettuce and so on and so forth.
Yep, and they were the hydroponics, right? Any other questions coming in? What about a grasshopper, Marty? So grasshoppers are, some grasshoppers are kosher. Okay, some grasshoppers are indeed kosher. The way that works is that we don't know which ones are kosher. There's a certain cryptic message in the Torah which says something about a certain kind of grasshopper. It's got its knees higher than its body. We're not sure what that is. We've lost the tradition. We've forgotten it over the past 2,000 years. And therefore, we just avoid all grasshoppers. I think I'm perfectly fine with that. Anybody miss grasshopper? You're okay with that? I'm good. Okay. I see that Miriam is telling us, she's translating juk into Hebrew. Miriam, this is not helpful because you're telling me that a juk is it's a cockroach. That's what it is.
Right. That's right.
It's a cockroach. Ouch. Ouch. So a juk is a cockroach. I didn't realize that a juk is actually a cockroach. I always thought of it as a bug. You know, to me, I see a lobster is a giant cockroach. So it is. It's a cockroach. It's huge. Right? So, just wanted to mention that. Right. Good.
Israel, that's the most problematic insect in the home.
In the home, yeah, it's unbelievable. The juk, so that's right, Miriam, you got it, right? So juk is a cockroach. It's just interesting. It's like, why did Hashem have to create this? Like, why did he have to?
Don't turn the lights off.
Just don't turn them on. It's better that way.
No, when you turn them on, they disappear.
Yeah, but if you keep them off, you won't notice. Yeah, these cockroaches. Let me tell you, they're like it's like a game reserve here in Florida. You know, sometimes. Yeah, what were you saying?
I keep a sneaker available just in case.
A sneaker available. That's good. Okay, good. He's got a sneaker on hand. Very good. Okay, now let's talk about the kinds of insects within the water, within the earth, and within the air. Right. So here it is. We're going to start off with the insects that are in the water. Generally speaking, there are two kinds of insects that are infesting in the water. One is an insect of the water that comes from water of the earth. Waters that flow out of the earth, like wells or springs. Those kind of water insects that come from water from beneath the earth, those insects are totally prohibited as insects of the water. But then there's a second kind of insect which is made out of water, which comes out of water, which doesn't flow, like water that's contained in a vessel. So it's not earth waters, like a well or a spring, but it's waters contained in a vessel, or waters that are in a pit, like you make a pit, and there's insects that somehow grow there, right? Or waters that are in a cave. So those insects are actually allowed to be eaten as long as they didn't infest and come out of the water and into like the side of the vessel. So as long as they didn't separate from the water and they're still in the water, as long as they didn't stick to like the walls of the cave or the walls of the pit, right? They're fine. But if they did infest outside of the water and then they came back into the water, now they've already become into non-kosher status. So therefore, you got to be careful. Even if you sifted the water, even if you did sift the water with a sifter, and you took out the insects from this kind of water, and then they fell back into the water, then they're 100% treif because they came out of the water and back in. Now, I don't really understand what this is. I don't know what kind of insect is it that grows in waters that are separated from the earth. I mean, maybe you guys can help me understand what kind of insect this is. That's why I mentioned earlier that there was the insects that are coming out of the rain. Terry said earlier that newts are, where do they come from? They come out of the ground. They're produced asexually, said Marty. So there's all sorts of asexual reproduction for the world of insects. It's quite fascinating. We're all obsessed with astronomical discoveries of outer space, but we realize that what goes on in the nanotechnology is actually quite much more amazing. When you realize what goes on in the stuff that is too small for us to see, instead of that which is too far for us to see. It's quite amazing the kind of stuff that goes on in there. Long note here from Winston about cockroaches crawling through flowers seeking food. They also transport pollen and thus help with plant reproduction. Cockroaches eat what other organisms leave laying, breaking it down and increasing the amount of nitrogen in the soil. Okay, look, I'm not saying, you're telling me why God created cockroaches. Okay, yeah, look, Winston, good. I'm sure that God has a good reason to create cockroaches, but why do you have to put them in the houses? Let me tell you, I know it goes on in Indonesia by you, Winston, but here in Florida, it's like... it's crazy. It's like out of control. We have like you got to pay your electric bill. You got to pay your termite, whatever what's it called? Your terminix, your insect control bill. It's like a standard utility, which you absolutely have. If you don't do that, let me tell you, you're in trouble. Okay, so if anybody has any comments on to add with us on the interesting insects of the water that come out of waters that are contained in a vessel, like what does that mean? Does that mean if I leave a cup overnight, right, on the kitchen counter, then by morning there's going to be insects coming out of it? I don't understand this. Like, where do they come from? How does this work? Right? I don't know. Okay, now what about drinking water from a vessel which has insects in that vessel, as I just described? Right? It's an exterminator. Thank you, Terry. I don't know about Atlanta, but here in Florida, heavy duty stuff. Okay, so, and by the way, there's different charges for different kinds of insects. So the exterminator will come to your house and be like, well, yeah, this is a different kind of insect. This one's not covered by your plan. But this, you need to spend another $100 a month. So I'm like, can I just get like the umbrella plan, which is covered? Is that like an umbrella insurance policy for all insects? Oh no, you need a special this, a special that, right? And then not to mention the kind of weird weeds that grow out in the garden now as well, right? That's a whole different kettle of fish. They don't touch the grass. You need a special license for that, a permit, right? You need so it's very very interesting situation going on here in Florida. What were you saying, Steve?
I was saying, soon they'll tell you on the left side of the lawn you can't breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe on the right side of the lawn.
Right. Terry, it's horrible there. In Atlanta, they call them palmetto bugs. Yeah, I think we have palmetto bugs.
Yeah, they're called here palmetto.
I think we have those too.
Yeah.
All right. We even have a street named after them. It's called Palmetto Park Boulevard, I think, down in Boca. It's a whole street named after the cockroach. It's amazing. Well, it's not really the cockroach. It's palmetto. Palmetto is a tree, I think, right? So waters that were found in a vessel. And now you water in the vessel, right? And now it's got insects in it. You're allowed to drink that water even if you're seeing the insects in the water. Yuck. Don't know why anybody in their right mind would want to drink this water, right? And there's no concern that the insects left the water and then came back. Like they went on a trip and they came back. You don't have to suspect that. If you see the insects in the water, you can safely assume that they're still in the water that they came from and they're good to go. But if the water is disgusting to you, as I would assume it should be, unless, I don't know, unless maybe you're in a desert, you haven't drank water for 6 days, maybe you want to drink that water. But if the water is disgusting to you, then you're not allowed to drink the water. Why? Because of a separate prohibition of Bal Teshachtu, which is the prohibition of making yourself abominable. You're not allowed to make yourself disgusting. By the way, this is also the reason why you have to go to the bathroom every morning and every evening. You have to go to the bathroom. You're not allowed to hold it in. You're not allowed to hold in your bowels. You have to go to the bathroom on a regular basis every morning and every evening. Why? So that you don't make yourself disgusting, right? And therefore, this water would be prohibited, not because it's treif of kosher, but because of a prohibition of making yourself abominable. And if there's any danger from drinking this water, then certainly you're not allowed to drink it, even for a separate prohibition of not putting yourself in a situation of danger, right? And this is something which we learned about during the coronavirus pandemic, which hopefully we can talk about in the past tense. Now that we have so many vaccines here, is that, we closed down the shuls. And everybody was saying, many people said, how you close down the shuls? We have to go to shul. And we said, listen, there's a mitzvah in the Torah which says that you have to protect yourself from harm, right? You can't put yourself in a dangerous situation. You can't just decide to walk across the highway or walk across PJ Boulevard because God will protect me. You're not allowed to put yourself in a dangerous situation. So to drink water, which potentially could be harmful for you, is prohibited for 3 reasons now. One is for kosher law, which we are discussing, and in this particular case, it's okay. A second reason is because it's disgusting and a prohibition of making yourself abominable, Bal Teshachtu. And a third prohibition is dangerous. You have to protect your body. God gave you a body, you have to protect it. You can't do anything dangerous. You can't jump into a fire. You can't kill yourself. You got to protect your body. And that's the prohibition of Nishmartem Eden Nafshei, and you should be exceedingly careful to guard your souls. If a person wants to sift this water so that it takes out all the jukim, all the bugs from the water, you should be careful that when you sift the water, like we just said, the bugs shouldn't get out of the water in the sifter and then fall back in by mistake. Because if a bug came out of the water of the vessel and then came back in, then we said before, then they became fully prohibited and you're not allowed to drink that water. All right? We'll stop over here. Any questions so far? Anybody questions? I'll just conclude by saying that tonight is Lag BaOmer at 7:30. We're having a story, s'mores and more bonfire here at the Chabad Palm Beach Garden. It's going to be a musical farbrengen around the bonfire tonight, celebrating Lag BaOmer, this beautiful mystical festival. At 11:30 today, Corey gives a class on Hebrew language through the Psalms of David or through the Siddur, Tuesdays, Thursdays. I can't remember which one. I think today is the Siddur. And that's on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom for men and women. And with that, I want to wish everybody a wonderful day. Try to connect with the power of tonight's Yontif, of Lag BaOmer. Read about it at jewishgardens.com/lag, L-A-G. That's jewishgardens.com/lag, L-A-G. Learn about Lag BaOmer, this beautiful mystical festival, the gift of the secrets of Torah that were given to us and revealed to our generations specifically. The Torah we've had the Torah for 3,250 years, but the secret Torah has been revealed to us only in the past few hundred years, specifically through the Chabad movement, and how fortunate we are that the secret Torah is able to inspire us through these incredibly dark, spiritually dark times, to give us the kayach, the strength that we need to persevere and to do what we need to do to bring Mashiach. Yes, Rob?
Rabbi, what is the word lag?
Lag is not a word. Lag is not a word. Lag is a number. It is Lamed Gimel 33. It's the 33rd day of the Omer. Because tonight we count 33 days of the Omer. It is the day when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, the culmination of all of his life. And he was the master teacher of the Kabbalah. He was one that wrote down the book of the Zohar. And therefore, he is the embodiment of the Kabbalah. Winston wants to know if we daven Ma'ariv before the Lag BaOmer service, before the Lag BaOmer bonfire. Well, since we're having the event at 7:30, it's too early to daven Ma'ariv. We will be davening Mincha at 7:30, I anticipate. And after Lag BaOmer, we'll probably do Ma'ariv. Because you can't daven Ma'ariv until after dark, especially when it's Lag BaOmer, and you can't count the Omer until after nightfall of each night. All right. Very good, everybody. Thank you for joining me here tonight. I hope you have a nice Lag BaOmer celebration out there in Indonesia. And thank you for joining me tomorrow morning. Don't forget, it's only on Zoom. It's only on Zoom. Friday mornings, do the For Bregman with the Rebbe. It's only on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you. We have a nice program tomorrow. I forget what it is, but it's going to be nice. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day and shalom.
Did we ever figure out what time it is in Indonesia?
We did figure out that he